My name is Margot Bennett, and I never imagined that the worst day of my professional life would begin with a smile from the daughter-in-law I once called family. This morning, I sat in a sunlit conference room I had helped design myself, surrounded by people I thought would stand by me forever. But loyalty is fragile when ambition walks into the room. Bianca, my son's wife, the new CEO, stood at the head of the long table, her hands resting on a folder that held more than just quarterly numbers. "We don't want outdated people in this company anymore," she said, her voice as sharp as broken glass. For a moment, it felt like the world stopped turning. I looked around the room and met the eyes of 23 men and women. Some were young enough to be my children. Some I had mentored, others I had hired and believed in more than they believed in themselves. In that moment, every one of them looked heartbroken for me and terrified for themselves. My son, Nathan, hadn't arrived yet. I kept thinking maybe if he walked in, he would see what was happening and stop it all. But Bianca didn't wait for him. Her gaze was cold as she turned to me. "Margot, your services are no longer needed. Please clear your office by the end of the day." Her words echoed in the glass, bouncing back to me like accusations. I could see Mallory from accounting biting her lip, her eyes shining with tears she refused to let fall. Across the table, Ben adjusted his glasses and looked down, refusing to meet my gaze. It felt like a public funeral for everything I had built. For 37 years, this company was my second home. I started as a receptionist when Nathan was just a little boy. I worked my way up to operations manager, then vice president, surviving recessions, family tragedies, and sleepless nights at my desk. I helped this business grow from a dusty little office to a glass tower that people in the city still point at when they talk about hard work and pride. Now, at 65, I thought I had seen everything. Losing my husband to a car accident, raising Nathan alone, rebuilding my life from scratch. But I never saw this coming. Not from Bianca, not like this. As the silence grew heavier, I realized Bianca expected tears or anger. She wanted an outburst, some display she could use to show that she was right to get rid of me. Instead, I took a breath. I kept my voice steady. "Well, I suppose that's that." I reached for the notepad I'd brought to 1,000 meetings, the pen with my initials, the simple objects that made me feel like I belonged. I saw her eyebrows twitch. Maybe she was hoping for more drama. But I refused to give it to her. I stood up, straightened my jacket, and walked toward the door with my head high. Behind me, Daniel from the design team spoke up, his voice trembling. "Margot, this isn't right. You built this place." I turned to him and tried to smile, though my heart was breaking. "Thank you, Daniel. That means more than you know." My eyes flickered to Bianca, and for one fleeting moment, I saw something in her face. It wasn't victory. It was uncertainty, or maybe even fear. I wondered what she was so afraid I would do. The walk down the hallway to my office felt longer than ever before. Every step was heavy with memory. Laughter after late nights, nervous excitement before big launches, even the tears in the restroom during the rough years. Every inch of this place carried my fingerprints. My office door creaked open, and the familiar sound cut me deeper than any insult. The space felt smaller now, like my achievements and my life here had been diminished, shrunk by Bianca's words. I reached for the old cardboard box I kept in my closet, always thinking I'd use it for donations, not for packing up the remnants of my career. The first thing I placed inside was a picture frame. Nathan's graduation photo, my favorite family vacation snapshot, a team photo from last year's Christmas party. Each one felt like saying goodbye to a different version of myself. Just then, a quiet knock on the door startled me. "Mrs. Bennett?" It was Mallory, the youngest accountant in the firm. She stood there, clutching a tissue, her voice trembling. I just wanted you to know this is wrong. Everyone here knows how much you've done for us. I put my hand on hers and tried to give her a real smile. Thank you, Mallory. I wanted to believe my own words when I said, sometimes change is necessary. But deep down, I knew this wasn't about change. This was about something much colder. After Mallory left, I kept packing. My chipped coffee mug went in next, a silly plant that never died no matter how many times I forgot to water it, the plaque from the Chamber of Commerce that meant so much to me when we first won it. By 4 o'clock, my office was stripped bare except for the furniture. I took a last look at the view from my window, the parking lot I'd watched fill and empty through years of storms and sunshine, promotions and layoffs, hellos and final goodbyes. Carrying my box down the main hallway, I felt the weight of every stare. Some people were openly crying. Some were hiding behind their monitors, but I could feel their sadness and their fear. Bianca was waiting by the elevator, arms crossed, a little smirk at the edge of her lips. "I trust you have everything," she said. Her voice was as flat as glass. I shifted the box and looked right at her. I really looked. The expensive suit, the diamond earrings, the wedding ring that matched the one Nathan wore, the ring that had once made me so happy for them both. "I do," I said. Then, surprising even myself, I smiled. Not a bitter smile, not a forced one, but something soft, almost serene. "Good luck, Bianca. You're gonna need it." Something in her face cracked for a moment. Maybe panic, maybe just doubt. I wondered what she was so afraid I would do. The walk down the hallway to my office felt longer than ever before. Every step was heavy with memory. Laughter after late nights, nervous excitement before big launches, even the tears in the restroom during the rough years. Every inch of this place carried my fingerprints. My office door creaked open, and the familiar sound cut me deeper than any insult. The space felt smaller now, like my achievements and my life here had been diminished, shrunk by Bianca's words. I reached for the old cardboard box I kept in my closet, always thinking I'd use it for donations, not for packing up the remnants of my career. The first thing I placed inside was a picture frame. Nathan's graduation photo, my favorite family vacation snapshot, a team photo from last year's Christmas party. Each one felt like saying goodbye to a different version of myself. Just then, a quiet knock on the door startled me. "Mrs. Bennett?" It was Mallory, the youngest accountant in the firm. She stood there, clutching a tissue, her voice trembling. I just wanted you to know this is wrong. Everyone here knows how much you've done for us." I put my hand on hers and tried to give her a real smile. "Thank you, Mallory. I wanted to believe my own words when I said, sometimes change is—" I sat in my car for a long while, the box of my life sitting on the passenger seat, sunlight warming the dashboard. My fingers rested on the steering wheel, unmoving. Through the windshield, I could see Bianca through the lobby windows, holding court with a few executives as if nothing of consequence had happened. In that instant, I wondered how it had all come to this. I replayed every decision, every late night, every small kindness, and every misstep that led to today. 3 years ago, Nathan brought Bianca home for Sunday dinner. I remember the way he looked at her, like she was a secret he couldn't wait to share. He had called me that morning, his voice full of that excited nervousness I hadn't heard since he was a teenager. "Mom, there's someone I want you to meet," he'd said. "And could you make your lemon chicken, please? She loves it." Bianca walked into my house that evening with perfect posture, her blonde hair swept over one shoulder, her dress simple but expensive. She smiled easily, but there was something in her eyes, something sharp and assessing, even when she complimented my table or listened to Nathan's stories about childhood. Her handshake was firm, almost competitive. I tried to set my suspicions aside. Nathan was so happy. He deserved a fresh start, someone to build a future with. That night after they left, I called my sister Vivian. There's something off about her, I confessed. And Vivian just laughed. Margot, you always worry about Nathan's girlfriends. You said the same thing about Emily, and she turned out to be a sweetheart. Maybe I was overprotective? I was all Nathan had after his father died when he was 15. We'd survived grief together, patched holes in each other's lives, and built a bond so strong I never believed anyone could come between us. But Bianca did. She wove herself into his life so seamlessly that sometimes it felt like she'd always been there. She told us she'd gone to Wharton for her MBA. She spoke of high-powered consulting jobs and said she left her last position due to ethical disagreements. Nathan hung on her every word, started wearing tailored suits, and let her choose new furniture for his apartment. His once casual living room became a model home, all silver and glass, no sign of the photos or mementos that used to fill his shelves. When I tried to talk to him about it, he laughed it off. Mom, she's got amazing taste. You should see what she's done with my place. It's like living in a whole new world. That phrase stuck with me. A whole new world. As if the old world we'd shared, the traditions we'd built, were no longer enough. Nathan started missing our Sunday dinners, always with polite excuses. Bianca planned getaways and business dinners that conveniently conflicted with every family event. When they did show up, Bianca controlled the conversation, steering Nathan's stories back to her own adventures or gently correcting his memories. "You're underselling yourself," she'd say with a musical laugh. "Don't be so modest, Nathan." The wedding announcement came a year and a half after that first dinner. They picked a vineyard outside the city, reserved for close family only, but the cost was astronomical. Nathan brushed off my concern. "Mom, it's just money. We'll make more." I tried to stay supportive, reminding myself that his happiness mattered most. But Bianca made it harder every day. She'd ask for my opinion on flowers, only to dismiss my suggestions. "Margot, that's lovely, but Bianca prefers something a bit more sophisticated," Nathan would say, already moving on to the next decision. The night before their wedding, I sat alone in my hotel room, my heart heavy. I called Vivian again. "I feel like I'm losing him," I whispered. Vivian tried to reassure me. "This happens, Margot. Sons get married and dynamic changes. He still loves you." But that's not how it felt. It felt like Bianca was replacing me, one small step at a time. After the wedding, Nathan and Bianca went off to Europe for their honeymoon. When Nathan hugged me goodbye, I held on longer than I should have. "I'm really happy, Mom," he whispered. "That's all I ever wanted," I said, even as my gut twisted. As they drove away, Bianca's hand resting on Nathan's arm, I felt like I'd watched my son leave for a world I couldn't follow. Now, sitting in the parking lot 3 years later, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror, I realized those instincts had been right. Bianca hadn't just wanted Nathan's love. She wanted his life, our family, and eventually even the company we built. Firing me wasn't just a business move. It was the final act in a takeover that started long before I ever saw it coming. I finally turned the key and drove home, every street looking different now that my purpose was gone. At home, the silence was suffocating. For decades, my phone buzzed with urgent messages, my email full of crises to solve. Now, nothing. I put the box on the kitchen table, the contents spilling slightly onto the lace runner. The house felt unfamiliar, as if I was a guest in a stranger's home. My phone buzzed with a text from Mallory. "Mrs. Bennett, after you left, Bianca called a staff meeting. She told everyone you'd been terminated for financial misconduct. She made us all sign NDAs. Everyone is devastated." I stared at the message until the words blurred. Financial misconduct. Bianca was accusing me of stealing from the company I'd built with my own hands. I made myself a cup of tea and tried not to shake as I opened my laptop. Maybe she had already cut me out, but my login still worked. I shouldn't have been surprised. Bianca was always so focused on grand gestures that sometimes she missed the details. I opened the company's financial systems and began scrolling. What I found stopped my heart. For the past 6 months, transfers had been made from our main operating account to an account I didn't recognize. At first, the amounts were small, just enough to go unnoticed. Then, over time, they grew. The most recent transfer was $50,000, and it had been approved by two people, Bianca Reed and N. Bennett, my son's digital signature. I felt sick. Either Nathan was involved or Bianca was forging his approval. I printed out every suspicious transaction, my hands steady now that adrenaline had replaced despair. 23 transfers. More than $200,000. My son's name on every line. The sound of a car door outside jolted me from my focus. Through the window, I saw Nathan's car pull up fast. He strode to the front door, not even bothering to knock, his key turning in the lock. "Mom, what happened today?" His tie was askew, and he looked more shaken than I'd ever seen him. "Bianca said you quit, but people are calling me in tears, telling me you were fired, and she's accusing you of theft." I motioned him to the table and handed him the printed pages. "Sit, Nathan. We need to talk." He stared at the papers, his face draining of color as he read the amounts, the signatures, the dates. "This isn't my signature," he said at last. "I never authorized any of this." I met his eyes and saw the boy I'd raised, the man who still wanted to believe in the people he loved. Then we both realized if Nathan wasn't part of this, then Bianca was stealing from us, framing me to cover her tracks, and doing it all behind the back of the man she promised to love. Nathan stood in my kitchen, silent for a long time, gripping those printed pages as if he could squeeze the truth out of them. His face shifted through disbelief, anger, and finally a quiet kind of devastation. "Mom, this isn't possible. Bianca knows how much you mean to me, how much you built this company. She would never do this." I wanted so badly to comfort him, to say it must be a mistake, but I'd seen too much already. I slid the final pages across the table. Dates, signatures, numbers, all pointing in the same damning direction. "Explain these," I said softly. Nathan flipped through the papers, reading every line. When he got to the signatures, he held them up to the kitchen light, as if hoping some flaw would reveal itself. "This isn't my writing." He shook his head slowly. "I never signed off on these transfers." I believed him because I'd watched him sign his name 1,000 times on school permission slips, on college applications, on his first lease, and years later, on the paperwork to bring me into the company as vice president. His signature was careful, looping. The ones on the transfers were close, but wrong. Someone had copied it. I reached across the table and put my hand over his. "Sweetheart, I know this is almost impossible to believe, but look at the pattern. She fired me while you were away, accused me of stealing the money she's been moving, and made everyone sign NDAs. Nathan stared at the papers in silence, then started pacing my small kitchen, one hand in his hair, his tie hanging loose around his neck. "If this is true," he whispered, "then my wife has been stealing from the company and framing my mother. That means every moment of our marriage has been a lie." I watched his world collapse in front of me. Nathan's loyalty had always been his greatest gift and his greatest flaw. He trusted people deeply, gave his heart without reservation. Now he was seeing that trust torn apart by the woman he'd built his future around. "I need proof," he said suddenly. "Before I do anything, before I confront her, I need something undeniable, something she can't explain away." I understood that. When your whole life feels like it's crumbling, you look for something solid to hold on to. "What kind of proof?" I asked him. He looked up, and I saw a new hardness in his eyes, the same fierce determination I'd seen in his father years before, the kind that leaves no room for doubt, the kind that shows me exactly who Bianca is. He sank down into the chair across from me and pressed his hands to his face. "I think she's been lying to me since the day we met," he said, his voice muffled. I think she never wanted me. She wanted what I could give her: access, opportunity, my name, my company. I put my hand on his shoulder, trying to steady him. You're not alone in this, Nathan. I'm here. I always have been. He nodded, the gesture small but full of meaning. We talked late into the night, piecing together every strange moment, every red flag, every awkward conversation we'd tried to explain away over the years, every missed family dinner, every abrupt change in plans, every time Bianca had shown up late with a new excuse and a bright smile that never quite reached her eyes. The more we talked, the clearer the pattern became. It wasn't a mistake, it was a plan. When Nathan left my house, it was nearly midnight. He promised to check their personal accounts to see if there were other irregularities he'd missed. I watched his car pull away, my heart breaking for all the pain I couldn't protect him from. I gathered the evidence into a folder and placed it in my safe. Then, for the first time in days, I let myself cry. I cried for the company, for my son, for the years I'd given to both, and for the woman who'd come into our lives and nearly destroyed everything we'd built. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. I stared at the ceiling and replayed every moment with Bianca, trying to see what I'd missed. When the phone rang at 6, I was already awake, a mug of tea cooling on the table. It was Nathan, and his voice sounded far away. "Mom, I need you to come over. Bring your key to the office. I need to get into Bianca's desk." I dressed quickly, my hands shaking a little as I locked the front door behind me. The streets were empty, washed clean by an early rain. Nathan's house was dark except for the lamp in his study. He sat at his desk, surrounded by documents and laptops, looking exhausted but more focused than I'd seen him in months. He didn't say anything at first, just pushed a folder across the desk. Her real name isn't Bianca Reed. It's Beatrice Russo. She wasn't between jobs when she met me. She was fired from her last company for embezzlement. The words hit me like a physical blow. I sank into the chair opposite him. "How did you find out?" "I hired a private investigator 6 months ago." I started having doubts. Her stories, her late nights, the way she changed the subject whenever I asked about her past. "I didn't tell you because I hoped I was wrong. I wanted to believe she was the woman I fell in love with. Turns out, your instincts were right all along." Nathan opened another folder, sliding it across to me. There were photos, Beatrice meeting with a man I didn't recognize, receipts from expensive dinners, bank statements showing more money disappearing. I looked up at my son, heart in my throat. "Who is he?" "His name is Marcus Webb. He's been with her for years," according to the investigator. "The condo they shared downtown was bought with money stolen from our company. Every trip she took, every business dinner she claimed to attend, she was with him." Nathan's voice was flat now, emptied of hope. "There's more," he said, pulling out one last document. "Beatrice faked a pregnancy to make me propose. She faked a miscarriage so I'd marry her immediately. The medical records, the photos, all of it, lies." I stared at the papers, unable to move. The woman who had destroyed my career had also destroyed my son's life, piece by piece, lie by lie. Nathan met my eyes. "We have to stop her, Mom, not just for us, but for everyone she might hurt next." I reached for his hand, holding on as tightly as I could. "We'll do it together. This time, she won't see us coming." We left Nathan's house as the city was just waking up. He drove, and I watched the early morning light stretch across quiet streets, painting the world gold and new, as if nothing bad could happen here. But in Nathan's eyes, I saw years of trust turning into suspicion, hope into resolve. Every red light felt like a countdown to confrontation. Neither of us spoke much on the way. We both knew what we needed to do. When we arrived at the office building, Nathan used his badge to let us in. The lobby was empty, except for the faint hum of cleaning machines. We rode the elevator in silence. The company felt like a haunted house. Echoes of laughter and late nights, celebrations, and all the ordinary days that had seemed so secure just a week ago. As the elevator door slid open, I felt my heart race in my chest, but I forced myself to breathe. This was my company, my home. I wouldn't let Bianca, strip that away from me, not without a fight. Nathan unlocked the office door with the master key, the one he'd insisted I keep when he first brought me in as vice president. He walked straight to Beatrice's desk. Everything was pristine, almost sterile. Every pen aligned, every paper stacked perfectly. I started searching drawers, hands trembling a little. In the bottom drawer, beneath company files, I found a manila folder labeled Personal Insurance. I opened it and nearly gasped. Inside were dozens of printed emails between Beatrice and Marcus Webb. Their tone was casual, chillingly so, as if planning the destruction of our lives was nothing more than a business arrangement. I handed the folder to Nathan, unable to find words. He scanned the pages, his jaw clenching tighter with every email. "Look at this one," he said, pointing. "N is getting suspicious. Time to accelerate the timeline. Make sure evidence points to him, not us." Nathan turned the computer screen toward me. "She used my login to make the transfers. She must have memorized my password. Every suspicious transaction was listed under his username, the timestamps carefully matching times when he was in meetings or elsewhere in the building." He looked up at me, his face pale. She knew how to make it look like I left my computer logged in and just walked away. We dug deeper. Every kindness, every thoughtful thing that Nathan had done for her, documented and twisted into ammunition. Beatrice had created a fake paper trail, claiming he was controlling and abusive. She took photos of modest jewelry and labeled it as forced displays of wealth. She spun ordinary arguments into stories of cruelty and isolation. Nathan stared at the evidence, his voice barely a whisper. How could I have missed this? I shook my head. Normal people don't think this way. Normal people don't set traps for the people who love them. But Nathan wasn't normal, not in the way that Beatrice was. He'd loved her, trusted her. That was never a flaw. At 8:15, we heard high heels clicking in the hall. She was early, no doubt eager to solidify her new power. Nathan's eyes met mine. He was scared, but ready. "What do you want to do?" I whispered. "We confront her. Let her try to talk her way out." The door swung open. Beatrice stood there, flawless as ever, navy suit, blonde hair, diamond earrings catching the light. When she saw us, she masked her surprise with a smile. "Nathan, what are you doing here so early? Margot, I thought we'd agreed your access was revoked." Nathan's voice was calm, but I could hear the steel in it. "Please sit down, Beatrice. This conversation involves you, me, and my mother." She slid gracefully into the chair, her posture perfect, hands folded. "I'm afraid I don't understand." Nathan spread the printed emails and photos across her desk. "Let's start with these. Your correspondence with Marcus Webb." For a heartbeat, she looked genuinely afraid. Then the mask slipped back on. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice flat. Nathan showed her the surveillance photo of her and Marcus, arms around each other, laughing outside a downtown condo. "The day you told me you were visiting your sick mother," he said quietly. For a moment, Beatrice's composure wavered. "All right, so I've been seeing someone else. That doesn't make me a criminal." Nathan shook his head, pushing the laptop toward her. "What about these transfers? The ones with my forged signature?" Now her hands trembled. She tried to hold his gaze. "You authorized those. You just don't remember because of all the stress." Nathan laughed, not kindly. "I was stressed because money kept disappearing. Money you were stealing." She tried to protest, but her words were desperate. "I was protecting our investments, moving funds to safer accounts." "Safer accounts in your boyfriend's name?" My voice broke through her protests. The mask dropped for real now, and the predator underneath glared at me. "Here's what's going to happen," Nathan said. "You're going to return every penny. You're going to sign a confession, and you're going to leave quietly without trying to burn down what's left of this company." Beatrice stood, her chair scraping the floor. "And if I refuse? Then I call the police. Fraud, embezzlement, identity theft." For a long moment, nobody moved. Beatrice looked like a cornered animal, calculation flickering behind her eyes as she weighed her options. Then she smiled, cold, empty. "You deserve everything that's coming, Nathan. You and your jealous mother." She turned her hate on me. "You never gave me a chance." I met her gaze. "I gave you every chance. You used every single one to hurt my son." "Your precious son is weak. He needed someone strong enough to build something real from this pathetic family business. By stealing from us? By betraying us?" Beatrice grabbed her purse. "If you want your money, sue me. Call the police. But you'll never prove anything, and by the time the lawyers are finished, there won't be a company left to save." She headed for the door, then paused and looked at Nathan. "And by the way, you might want to get tested. Marcus and I haven't been exclusive, if you know what I mean." With that final cruelty, she left, her heels echoing down the hall. Nathan sat down, silent. I went to him and held him while his world unraveled, while everything he believed about love and trust turned to dust. But even as Beatrice's car roared out of the parking lot, I knew in my bones this wasn't over. Women like her don't disappear quietly. They always have one last move, one last secret. I held Nathan's hand and promised, whatever she tried next, we would face it together. And as I looked at my son, broken but not beaten, I whispered that the truth was on our side. But I knew the storm wasn't done. It was only just beginning. After Beatrice stormed out of the office, the air felt thin, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Nathan sat hunched over his desk, face in his hands, and for a moment I was afraid the grief would break him. I circled the desk and wrapped my arms around his shoulders the way I used to when he was a child after a nightmare. For a long while, neither of us spoke. Sometimes the only comfort left is the steady warmth of another person who refuses to let you go. Outside, the office was beginning to wake up. Phones were ringing, keyboards clattered in the open area. I knew whispers would already be spreading. News in companies like ours always traveled faster than facts. But I didn't care about office gossip or reputations anymore. All that mattered was protecting my son and the legacy we'd built together. Nathan finally straightened up and wiped his eyes with the heel of his hand. "I'm sorry, Mom. I never wanted you to get hurt." I squeezed his shoulder. "You didn't hurt me, Nathan. She did. And she's not going to get away with it." He looked at me with a kind of desperate hope. "What do we do now?" I thought about that question for a moment. It was clear Beatrice wasn't going to leave quietly. She was angry and dangerous and still capable of causing more harm if we weren't careful. "We have to gather everything," I said quietly. "Not just for us, but for the company. We'll bring the evidence to the authorities. Every document, every transaction, every lie she told." Nathan nodded, already finding his strength again. The shock was giving way to purpose. He started pulling files from his computer, gathering emails, bank statements, even security footage showing when he wasn't at his desk during the times money was transferred. I called my old friend Laura, who worked in compliance and had helped us during rough times before. I told her everything. Nothing held back. Laura promised she'd stand by us and that she'd help us navigate the legal and financial aftermath. I felt a surge of gratitude and also regret that I hadn't called for help sooner. The next days passed in a blur of police interviews, meetings with attorneys, and hard conversations with our board of directors. It turned out Beatrice hadn't just been stealing from us. She'd left a network of half-truths, bribes, and threats in her wake. She tried to sue the company for wrongful termination, and she started spreading rumors that Nathan was abusive and that I'd been stealing long before she ever joined the business. I should have felt anger, but mostly I felt tired. There's a unique kind of exhaustion that comes from being portrayed by someone you tried to love. But our staff rallied behind us. Mallory organized a statement of support signed by nearly everyone in the company. Ben started collecting positive emails and testimonials from clients and vendors who'd worked with me for decades. Even people I thought had been quietly judging me came forward, telling stories about how I'd given them second chances, mentored them, believed in them when no one else did. Nathan and I spent long evenings at my kitchen table, sometimes talking about next steps, sometimes just sitting quietly together. He was wounded, but I could see a spark returning to his eyes. He started making plans, not just for the company's survival, but for his own future. I knew healing wouldn't come quickly. Wounds like this always leave scars, but at least the truth was finally out in the open. One evening, after a long day of sorting evidence, Nathan poured us each a glass of wine. He stared into his, swirling it slowly, his thoughts far away. "You know, Mom, I keep thinking about that first dinner when I brought her home. I wanted you to love her so badly. I wanted you to be proud of me." My heart ached hearing that. "Oh, Nathan, you never had to earn my pride. It was always yours." He smiled, a sad but genuine smile. "I just wish I'd listened when you said you had doubts. You were right from the start." You loved her, Nathan. That's nothing to be ashamed of. It means you have a heart and you believe the best about people. The world needs more of that, not less. He nodded, setting down his glass. "I think I'm ready to move forward. Not just with the company, but with my life." I hugged him again, fierce and certain. I knew he meant it. After so many years of loss and rebuilding, this was just another chapter. A painful one, yes, but not the end. Days turned into weeks. The authorities built their case against Beatrice. The evidence was overwhelming. She tried to run, but they found her and Marcus together in a rented apartment across the city, their lives packed in suitcases, their lies finally catching up with them. When the police called to say she'd been arrested, I sat in silence for a long time, feeling both relief and sorrow. Justice wasn't a balm for all wounds, but it was a start. Still, I wondered if the company and my son could truly recover from what she'd done. As I looked out my kitchen window at the darkening sky, I found myself whispering a quiet promise. No matter what came next, we would survive. We would rebuild, and I would never let anyone convince my son that his family was the enemy. But I knew, even then, that Beatrice wasn't finished with us yet. People like her never accept defeat. They find cracks to slip through, secrets to weaponize, wounds to reopen. I just didn't know what form her next move would take, or how far she'd go to get her revenge. I sat in my car for a long while, the box of my life sitting on the passenger seat, sunlight warming the dashboard. My fingers rested on the steering wheel, unmoving. Through the windshield, I could see Bianca through the lobby windows, holding court with a few executives as if nothing of consequence had happened. In that instant, I wondered how it had all come to this. I replayed every decision, every late night, every small kindness, and every misstep that led to today. 3 years ago, Nathan brought Bianca home for Sunday dinner. I remember the way he looked at her, like she was a secret he couldn't wait to share. He had called me that morning, his voice full of that excited nervousness I hadn't heard since he was a teenager. "Mom, there's someone I want you to meet," he'd said. "And could you make your lemon chicken, please? She loves it." Bianca walked into my house that evening with perfect posture, her blonde hair swept over one shoulder, her dress simple but expensive. She smiled easily, but there was something in her eyes, something sharp and assessing, even when she complimented my table or listened to Nathan's stories about childhood. Her handshake was firm, almost competitive. I tried to set my suspicions aside. Nathan was so happy. He deserved a fresh start, someone to build a future with. That night after they left, I called my sister Vivian. "There's something off about her," I confessed, and Vivian just laughed. "Margot, you always worry about Nathan's girlfriends. You said the same thing about Emily, and she turned out to be a sweetheart." Maybe I was overprotective. I was all Nathan had after his father died when he was 15. We'd survived grief together, patched holes in each other's lives, and built a bond so strong I never believed anyone could come between us. But Bianca did. She wove herself into his life so seamlessly that sometimes it felt like she'd always been there. She told us she'd gone to Wharton for her MBA. She spoke of high-powered consulting jobs and said she left her last position due to ethical disagreements. Nathan hung on her every word, started wearing tailored suits, and let her choose new furniture for his apartment. His once casual living room became a model home, all silver and glass, no sign of the photos or mementos that used to fill his shelves. When I tried to talk to him about it, he laughed it off. "Mom, she's got amazing taste. You should see what she's done with my place. It's like living in a whole new world." That phrase stuck with me. A whole new world. As if the old world we'd shared, the traditions we'd built, were no longer enough. Nathan started missing our Sunday dinners, always with polite excuses. Bianca planned getaways and business dinners that conveniently conflicted with every family event. When they did show up, Bianca controlled the conversation, steering Nathan's stories back to her own adventures or gently correcting his memories. "You're underselling yourself," she'd say with a musical laugh. "Don't be so modest, Nathan." The wedding announcement came a year and a half after that first dinner. They picked a vineyard outside the city, reserved for close family only, but the cost was astronomical. Nathan brushed off my concern. "Mom, it's just money. We'll make more." I tried to stay supportive, reminding myself that his happiness mattered most. But Bianca made it harder every day. She'd ask for my opinion on flowers, only to dismiss my suggestions. "Margot, that's lovely, but Bianca prefers something a bit more sophisticated," Nathan would say, already moving on to the next decision. The night before their wedding, I sat alone in my hotel room, my heart heavy. I called Vivian again. "I feel like I'm losing him," I whispered. Vivian tried to reassure me. "This happens, Margot. Sons get married and dynamic changes. He still loves you." But that's not how it felt. It felt like Bianca was replacing me, one small step at a time. After the wedding, Nathan and Bianca went off to Europe for their honeymoon. When Nathan hugged me goodbye, I held on longer than I should have. "I'm really happy, Mom," he whispered. "That's all I ever wanted," I said, even as my gut twisted. As they drove away, Bianca's hand resting on Nathan's arm, I felt like I'd watched my son leave for a world I couldn't follow. Now, sitting in the parking lot 3 years later, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror, I realized those instincts had been right. Bianca hadn't just wanted Nathan's love. She wanted his life, our family, and eventually even the company we built. Firing me wasn't just a business move. It was the final act in a takeover that started long before I ever saw it coming. I finally turned the key and drove home, every street looking different now that my purpose was gone. At home, the silence was suffocating. For decades, my phone buzzed with urgent messages, my email full of crises to solve. Now, nothing. I put the box on the kitchen table, the contents spilling slightly onto the lace runner. The house felt unfamiliar, as if I was a guest in a stranger's home. My phone buzzed with a text from Mallory. "Mrs. Bennett, after you left, Bianca called a staff meeting. She told everyone you'd been terminated for financial misconduct. She made us all sign NDAs. Everyone is devastated." I stared at the message until the words blurred. Financial misconduct. Bianca was accusing me of stealing from the company I'd built with my own hands. I made myself a cup of tea and tried not to shake as I opened my laptop. Maybe she had already cut me out, but my login still worked. I shouldn't have been surprised. Bianca was always so focused on grand gestures that sometimes she missed the details. I opened the company's financial systems and began scrolling. What I found stopped my heart. For the past 6 months, transfers had been made from our main operating account to an account I didn't recognize. At first, the amounts were small, just enough to go unnoticed. Then, over time, they grew. The most recent transfer was $50,000, and it had been approved by 2 people, Bianca Reed and N. Bennett, my son's digital signature. I felt sick. Either Nathan was involved or Bianca was forging his approval. I printed out every suspicious transaction, my hands steady now that adrenaline had replaced despair. 23 transfers. More than $200,000. My son's name on every line. The sound of a car door outside jolted me from my focus. Through the window, I saw Nathan's car pull up fast. He strode to the front door, not even bothering to knock, his key turning in the lock. "Mom, what happened today?" His tie was askew, and he looked more shaken than I'd ever seen him. "Bianca said you quit, but people are calling me in tears, telling me you were fired, and she's accusing you of theft." I motioned him to the table and handed him the printed pages. "Sit, Nathan. We need to talk." He stared at the papers, his face draining of color as he read the amounts, the signatures, the dates. "This isn't my signature," he said at last. "I never authorized any of this." I met his eyes and saw the boy I'd raised, the man who still wanted to believe in the people he loved. Then we both realized if Nathan wasn't part of this, then Bianca was stealing from us, framing me to cover her tracks, and doing it all behind the back of the man she promised to love. In the weeks after Detective Morrison's revelations, life started to move in cautious, halting steps toward normal again. Nathan and I focused on the work in front of us. Every day, a small act of rebuilding. There were contracts to renegotiate, clients to reassure, employees to thank for their loyalty. I tried to pour my energy into the company, believing that if I just worked hard enough, I could patch every wound Beatrice had left behind. But some wounds linger. At night, when the lights in the building were dim and most of the staff had gone home, I'd find Nathan sitting at his desk, staring at spreadsheets but lost in thought. Sometimes he'd say, "I feel like an idiot, Mom. How could I have let her fool me?" And I'd tell him again and again that love isn't foolish. Trusting someone isn't a weakness. It's what makes us human. The news of Beatrice's crimes spread through the local business community and beyond. Reporters called. Some former friends kept their distance, not wanting to be associated with a scandal, but just as many people reached out. Old clients who remembered my integrity, staff who had left years ago but never forgot the way I treated them when they needed help. Their support was a lifeline, something real to hold on to as the case grew. One Thursday, as autumn swept gold leaves past the office windows, Nathan received a letter from Beatrice's attorney. She was suing for a share of the company's assets in the divorce. Despite the evidence against her, despite everything she'd done, she wanted money, a final grasp at what she couldn't destroy. Nathan let out a bitter laugh when he read the letter. She just can't help herself, can't she? I could see the exhaustion in his eyes. For a moment, I was afraid he'd give up, but instead he stood and walked to the window, his silhouette strong against the late sunlight. "We'll fight her," I said softly. "And this time, she's not going to win." Nathan looked at me, and I saw in his eyes not just determination, but something like peace. "I'm not fighting for revenge anymore, Mom. I'm fighting for us, for what's left after all the lies." That night, Mallory texted me. "Mrs. Bennett, the staff wants to organize something for you and Nathan, a celebration maybe, a dinner, just to show how much we're glad you're still here." I felt tears prick my eyes at her words. After all the destruction Beatrice had caused, there was still so much loyalty and kindness in this place. I texted back, "Tell everyone thank you. I can't imagine surviving this year without you all." The trial date approached, and Nathan was called to testify. We spent long evenings preparing, going over every detail, every memory, every document. I worried about how he would handle seeing Beatrice again, hearing her voice in a courtroom. The day before the trial, he sat at my kitchen table, staring at a photo of him and his father taken years before. "Do you think Dad would be proud of me?" he asked quietly. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Your father would be proud of how you never gave up, how you kept fighting for what was right, even when it would have been easier to just walk away." Nathan blinked back tears and managed a shaky smile. I'm scared, Mom. Not of her, but of what comes after. What if I can't trust anyone ever again? That question haunted me. I didn't know how to answer except to promise that healing is slow but possible. The people who love us for real, they don't ask us to forget, but they show us that trust is still worth it. The morning of the trial, Nathan dressed in his best suit. He looked older, changed by everything he'd lived through, but also steadier. We drove to the courthouse together, hearts pounding but shoulders squared. Outside, the sky was cold and bright. Reporters waited on the steps, cameras flashing. Nathan took a deep breath and said, "Let's do this, Mom. Whatever happens, we do it together." Inside, Beatrice sat at the defense table, her hair pulled back, her expression unreadable. For the first time, I saw her not as a villain or a threat, but as someone lost, someone whose greed and emptiness had eaten everything good inside her. The prosecutor laid out the evidence with relentless clarity. The fake emails, the forged signatures, the hidden bank accounts. The jury listened silent and attentive as Nathan testified about the betrayal and the damage done. During a break, he came to sit beside me in the hallway. He was pale, his hand shaking, but his eyes were clear. I asked if he wanted to leave, to escape all this for even a minute. But he shook his head. "No, Mom, I need to see this through. I need to watch her face when she finally realizes she lost. And I want you to see it too, for both of us." I nodded, my heart aching with pride and pain. I realized in that moment that even after all Beatrice had taken from us, she couldn't destroy the most important thing we had left, our family, broken as it was, but still here, still holding on. As the trial neared the end, I could sense a shift in the air, as if justice itself was waiting just outside the door, ready to finally settle the debts Beatrice owed us all. The trial lasted longer than any of us expected. Each day brought new revelations, evidence of just how methodical Beatrice and Marcus had been, how many layers of deceit they'd spun, and how many people they'd hurt before they ever walked through our doors. The prosecutors called witnesses from other companies in other states, men and women who sat in the same chair as Nathan, their voices shaking as they described the patterns that had destroyed their businesses and families. Beatrice listened, her expression growing stonier with each testimony, as if she could simply will herself above the consequences. When Nathan finished testifying, he walked out of the courtroom into the bright, cold hallway, and for a moment he looked lost. I hugged him, feeling his heart pounding against my shoulder, and whispered, "You did it. You told the truth. That's all any of us could do." The defense tried to spin a story of misunderstanding and ambition, painting Beatrice as a victim of difficult circumstances and manipulative men. But the mountain of evidence, the consistency of every story, and the relentless clarity of Nathan's account made the truth impossible to hide. On the day the jury returned with their verdict, the courtroom was so silent you could hear the judge's pen tapping on the desk. Guilty. The word echoed through the room, heavy and final. I watched Beatrice flinch, just for a heartbeat, and for the first time, her mask broke. I didn't feel triumph. I felt sorrow for the wasted love and all the years we would never get back. Nathan held my hand tight, his breath shaky. "It's over," he whispered, but I knew that wasn't quite true. Justice doesn't erase pain. It just draws a line so healing can begin. Beatrice was sentenced to years in federal prison, Marcus too. Their assets were seized, and the court ordered restitution. Money we knew we'd likely never see, but the gesture mattered. The news made headlines, and overnight, the company's name was everywhere. Scandal, resilience, and finally, recovery. The day after the sentencing, Nathan and I went back to the office. The staff greeted us not just with relief, but with hope. Mallory had baked a cake, decorated with the words, "Still Standing." Even Ben, usually reserved, gave Nathan a rare smile and clapped him on the back. There was laughter, cautious at first, but it grew. People lingered after work, sharing stories about the early days, about dreams for the company's future. Nathan stood in front of the team, his voice steady but emotional. "I know we've all been through hell," he said, "but we came through because we told the truth and we stood together." He paused, looking at me. "My mother built this company. She showed me how to fight for what matters. If you ever wonder what loyalty means, look around. You're looking at it." That evening, Nathan came home with me instead of going to his empty house. We sat in the kitchen, the box of old photos between us, and talked late into the night. We remembered the good things: family dinners, holidays, his father's terrible jokes, and even the early days of the company when nothing seemed certain. There were moments of silence, but they felt peaceful, not heavy. For the first time in months, the fear was gone. The house felt like home again. A week later, the first letter from Beatrice arrived. She wrote from prison, pleading for forgiveness, denying everything, even as she admitted the facts. Nathan read it once, then threw it away. "She doesn't get to write our story anymore," he said quietly. Slowly, Nathan began to find his way back to himself. He went on long walks, started playing guitar again, and even joined a local business group, determined to help others avoid the traps he had fallen into. People called to offer new opportunities. Clients who had left returned, and soon our company's reputation was not just restored, but stronger than ever. One afternoon, Nathan asked if I'd like to meet someone he had been talking to, a teacher named Grace. I saw a light in his eyes I hadn't seen since before Beatrice. Not excitement, but something softer, something real. I said yes. We made dinner together, the three of us, and I listened as Grace told stories about her students and her own journey through loss and healing. Watching them, I felt something lift from my heart, a quiet, bluing hope that the future might still hold joy. At the end of the night, as Nathan walked Grace to her car, I stood at the kitchen sink looking out at the evening sky. I thought of everything we had survived, of love given and love lost, of betrayal and justice, and the long, winding road back to trust. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was something better. It was real. We had been broken, but not defeated. We had learned that the worst betrayals cannot destroy you if you hold fast to the truth and to the people who truly love you. The next morning, as the sun rose over the city, I poured myself a cup of coffee, sat by the window, and let myself imagine what new days could bring. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly at peace. As the months passed after the trial, it became clear that some wounds would never fully disappear, but time brought its own kind of mercy. Nathan focused on rebuilding not just the business, but his sense of self, letting go of the guilt that had settled into his bones. There were days when grief crept back, days when he'd find a forgotten note in Beatrice's handwriting, or a memory would rise unexpectedly, sharp as broken glass. But each time, he faced it with more steadiness than before, letting himself feel the pain, but refusing to let it define him. I saw him start to open up again, slowly, almost shyly. He volunteered for mentorship programs at the local college, guiding young entrepreneurs with a frankness that only someone who's survived real loss can offer. He talked openly about mistakes, about trusting the wrong people, about learning to forgive himself. The students looked at him with admiration. And sometimes I did too. I couldn't have been prouder. At home, our routines quietly returned. Shared dinners, walks in the park, even silly arguments over the remote. Nathan asked Grace to join us more often. She fit easily into our lives, her laughter lightening even the hardest days. I could see her gentle encouragement working a subtle magic on Nathan's heart, helping him remember the possibility of love without fear. The scars Beatrice left were still there, but they were fading, covered over by new growth. One afternoon, as we sat in the office reviewing a new contract, Nathan turned to me, his eyes thoughtful. "Mom, do you ever regret giving so much to this company? All the late nights, the sacrifices?" I thought about it. The decades of hard work, the struggles and losses, the heartbreaks and betrayals. I remembered the day I was fired, the shock of humiliation in that glass-walled conference room, I remembered the loneliness that followed, the way hope felt so distant for a while. I shook my head. No, I told him. Even with everything that's happened, even with Beatrice, I don't regret any of it. This company gave us a purpose. It brought us together. It survived storms before, and it will survive whatever comes next, as long as we remember why we started. Nathan nodded, a slow smile warming his face. I want to build something new now, he said, not just for us, but for everyone who stuck with us. He talked about expanding our foundation's scholarship program, about supporting survivors of fraud and domestic abuse, about using our own scars to help others heal. I listened, pride welling up in my chest. Late that night, I got a message from Mallory. She'd just finished leading a support group for employees and wanted to thank me for giving her a second chance when she needed it. Your strength gave the rest of us permission to speak up, she wrote. The company isn't just a business anymore. It's a family. I sat at my kitchen table in the quiet, letting her words soak in. After all that had been broken, there was so much to be grateful for. A week later, the company held its annual banquet, something I once dreaded after Beatrice's betrayal, but now looked forward to as a symbol of survival. Nathan gave a speech, his voice clear and confident. We've been through hell together, he said, but we came out stronger. The real value of what we've built here isn't in the numbers on a spreadsheet. It's in the trust we share, in the kindness we show, and in the family we choose. As the room erupted in applause, I felt tears prick my eyes. Not just from relief, but from a deep, bone-deep happiness I'd almost forgotten I could feel. Grace slipped her hand into Nathan's, and the smile they shared was soft and real, not born from need or fear, but from something much more enduring. That night, after everyone went home, Nathan lingered in my office as he once had as a boy, asking for advice about homework or girls. He looked around at the old photos, the familiar furniture, the plant that had survived everything, even Beatrice. Mom, he said quietly, do you think Dad would have believed all this? I smiled, remembering his father's endless faith in us. He always believed in second chances and in the strength it takes to keep going even after you lose everything. Nathan squeezed my hand, and for a long time we just sat there, the weight of the past finally settling. Outside, the city lights glowed. Life moved on, imperfect and unpredictable, but with the promise of new beginnings. As we locked up and walked into the night, I felt something I hadn't felt since long before Beatrice arrived. A sense that at last, we were truly free. But even in that freedom, I knew that the lessons we'd learned would never leave us. Trust, once broken, is slow to return. Yet, somehow, hope is always waiting. Quiet, patient, and stubbornly alive. The year after Beatrice's conviction moved by in a way that was both gentle and surprising. I found myself rediscovering simple joys, a quiet morning with coffee on the porch, fresh flowers from the market, an unexpected phone call from an old friend. The world hadn't changed, but I had. The sharp pain of betrayal faded, replaced by a steadier kind of gratitude for every new day we were given. Nathan settled into his new life with a humility and strength I hadn't seen in him since he was a young man. He worked hard, but not just for the company's success anymore. He took time off, traveled with Grace, and even learned to laugh at himself again. I watched the two of them from across my dinner table sometimes, sharing inside jokes or arguing playfully about which movie to watch. It was such a simple, ordinary happiness, and yet it felt more precious than any victory or award. Our company flourished. Some clients had left, but many more returned, drawn by the honesty and resilience that had come to define us. We offered new training programs and scholarships for those hurt by fraud and abuse, sharing our story not as a tale of defeat, but as proof that survival is always possible, no matter how deep the wounds. On the anniversary of the trial, Mallory organized a small gathering in the office. There was no cake or fanfare this time, just a quiet moment when the staff shared memories, hopes, and laughter. Nathan took my hand in his, looked around at the faces that had weathered the storm with us, and thanked everyone for believing, not just in the company, but in the power of truth and forgiveness. Later that evening, Nathan and I walked together through the city, just as we had years ago, when we dreamed about building something lasting. The sky was full of stars, the air warm with the promise of spring. "Do you think we're finally past it, Mom?" he asked, quietly, as if afraid the pain might still come back to claim us. I smiled, linking my arm through his. "We'll always remember, Nathan, but remembering doesn't mean living in fear. It means honoring what we survived." He nodded, taking a deep breath, and I could almost see the weight lifting from his shoulders. A few weeks later, Nathan surprised me with news. He and Grace were engaged. They wanted something small, quiet, just family and a few close friends. When the day arrived, I watched my son walk into a new chapter, not with blind hope, but with clear eyes and an open heart. Grace squeezed my hand before the ceremony. "Thank you for trusting me with him," she whispered, her eyes shining. I hugged her, feeling tears prick my eyes, but this time they were tears of happiness. The wedding was simple and beautiful, held in the backyard beneath an archway of wildflowers. There was music, laughter, and a sense of peace that wrapped around all of us. As Nathan and Grace danced together beneath the lights, I realized that the story Beatrice tried to write for us, the one filled with loss and bitterness, would never be the one we lived. We had chosen a different ending, one made of hope and new beginnings. That night, as I sat on the porch alone, I thought about the twists and turns that had brought us here. The betrayals, the heartache, the victories, and the quiet moments of healing. I thought about the people who stood by us when we needed them most. I thought about forgiveness, not as something you grant your enemies, but as a gift you give yourself so you can finally let go and move forward. I want to ask you, listening to my story, what would you have done if you were in my place? Have you ever survived something that tried to break you? Have you found your own way back to trust and peace? Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what this story means to you. Your voice, your story, might be the encouragement someone else needs right now. Thank you for staying with me until the end. And if you want more stories of resilience, justice, and the power of family, there are 2 more waiting for you at the end screen. Click and join me for the next chapter. Until then, remember, no matter what you survive, you are never truly alone.